Hi.
Hey, how are
Can you
you?
hear? Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
hear me.
loud and clear. Okay. So,
Good.
yeah. Oh, yeah, you said that you have an accent. So
I
I
do have
guess
a.
I guess Ecotopia, that's got to be what, like a portmanteau, ecological utopia, your socialist fantasy world.
Well, the only world that wouldn't mean that we're all gonna die in 10 years. Like I'm like totally fatalist. So to be honest, to like begin, like yeah, we're screwed. We are fucked. It's done. Like there's nothing we can do. We can fight, but that's it.
You think it's that bad, eh?
Yeah, I have been reading lots of climate science in the last 10 years. So yes.
Oh, 1 second, I have a little technical issue here. Um,
Oh,
it's just not capturing Discord. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. So I guess before we get into it, just I'll probably end up uploading this. So for people who will probably end up watching, I guess you should maybe just say like who you are, like relevant qualifications, why you wanted to chat, just anything that seems relevant to you like that.
okay. So hey, I'm Dina. Yeah, that's actually my name. Means my heart. This is because my dad is Turkish, my mom is German. So yeah, so I'm super Caucasian. Turks are Caucasians, by the way, if anybody doesn't know anymore. That's where the word comes from. I'm actually I did a master's in cultural anthropology, Islam study, and political science of South Asia. And then everybody else was still studying, and I was kind of jealous of them having seminars. So I was like, okay, I need to do a PhD. So I also get to still study and don't have to work yet. So basically, then I went to Istanbul and started a PhD, and I like wondered what I burned for. And I realized I burned for the question of democracy, autocracy. And I wanted to do a PhD on happiness. If people in an autocracy are happier than in a democracy. And then I went to China for a year, and the environment was so screwed that I'm like, okay, drop this. Happiness cannot be measured anyway. I'm going to do environment, autocracy, democracy. So I did my PhD on the fact that democracy can never produce sustainable, like really sustainable policies and politics. That it can only like, yeah, it can do greenwashing and like pretend to do stuff, but really like change our system in a way that we get to be sustainable. That's not possible. So yeah, so I did a lot of work on that. Now I'm actually a member of a left party, so it's called a socialist party. So that's why I'm here today, because I saw you arguing with Central Committee or something.
Yeah, Mike from PA.
Um, yeah, and he was just like he was just vegan for like 3 months. So and he wasn't in the eco part. So I thought, yeah, he was making some like good arguments, and he was suggesting a study I would have suggested too. But yeah, I felt the urge to interfere and be like, no, there's more convincing stuff. And you can add this here and there. So yeah, so that's why I contacted you and was like, yeah, I want to talk about that subject.
I think you just hit literally every point that I suggested you hit, so that's great. Yeah, I understand that impulse entirely because I often watch conversations. I mean, if we're talking about sort of like lefty combos, I saw Mexi talk to ContraPoints about veganism a while back, and I just think Mexi makes a really bad case, and I just feel the impulse to go and make a better case. I reached out with no response, but like this is frequently the position I'm in. I see someone arguing for my side and I'm like, "Oh, no, like they're saying all life is equal or they're saying like, whatever the vegan bullshit is. You can get your B12 naturally, some insane shit." And I'm like, "Okay, maybe I can get in there and at least make a better case so people know the case exists, even if I don't convince the person." Your sound
Totally.
is cut out.
Why is my sound cut off?
No, it's there now. Most likely, what it is there's two modes on Discord. There's push to talk, where you push a button and it records whatever's coming through, or there's voice activity, where your voice has to hit a certain threshold. So probably what it is you were talking below the threshold. Yeah. So if it becomes a problem, I'll mention it again, but let's just not worry about it right now. And
I don't like the pushy thing.
Two other things before you continue. That same problem happened when you said your name, so I didn't catch your name.
It's Didem, D-I-D-E-M.
Didem? Am I saying that close enough?
Yes.
Didem. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
that was really good. Really good.
It's as good as it's gonna get. Okay.
I want you to remember the content, not the form. Like, not me, but yeah.
It's still important to have a name to call someone by, but yes, of course, I will remember you for your ideas and not the series of mouth sounds associated with you. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, I'm not really big into politics. Like, I don't watch a whole lot of political content, so I consider myself like pretty much a noob in this area. Even in the areas I spend more time, like philosophy, I consider myself like, moderate. Like, there's people who know a shitload more, but politics, it's like I really don't know that much. So I'm open to persuasion. Currently, when we're talking about, capitalism or socialism, this kind of stuff, I'm not committed to any particular ideology. I'm happy to hear arguments either way. And I'm right now, I just kind of consider myself like an incrementalist. I'm sort of okay with whatever policy is tried out, as long as it's not so radical that it might have like crazy consequences that we don't intend. And then I'm okay with preserving the policies that seem to have good outcomes. I'm very concerned with things like the environment. I'm concerned with things like, healthcare, general, well-being for people. So that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, I mean, just go ahead with whatever you feel is important to talk about.
So in a sense, obviously, since I already said the status quo is so bad, right? It's radically destructive. So yeah, I'm a radical into the other direction, but given the status quo. So if somebody says to me they're not like really good with radical change and stuff like that, I'm always like, that's because our society tells us that radical is like somehow something bad, like our cognitive framework is like somehow something bad. I actually made myself like t-shirts with glitter that say militant vegan. It's like glittery, and like people look at me like, what? Mm-hmm. So they get like all confused. So yeah, I am having a radical position, but only given that what we are doing now, that is irreversible damage, right? Mm-hmm. Like we cannot, like we're not gonna come back from that. We are in the 6th mass extinction. It's gonna take like, I think I read one time 100 million years to have the same diversity of species that we had before we started killing them all off. Mm. So we are at the moment, what you really have to like understand is that what we are doing, like the current mode of the system is radical. It's like radically destructive.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I should say. I'm not inherently against anything radical. Once I'm convinced that something is legitimate, I'll support it. Like you might say veganism is a radical departure from the status quo, but I think the arguments are persuasive. So it's not that I'm inherently against being radical. It's that when you talk about a radical change, it seems like it's easier to do something that might have really crazy, unpredicted consequences. That's why I generally am like, okay, I'm all right with incremental change, because then if we fuck it up, it's easy to roll it back. But there's areas where I am convinced you need radical change. Climate is another one. So yeah.
Yeah. I actually started with my PhD with a quote from the World Meteorological Institute that we are running an experiment, a giant experiment whose consequences can only be surpassed by global nuclear war. Mm. So that's exactly what you said. That's how I started my PhD, with saying like, we are radically fucking this up. We need to do something like totally different. So yeah, to begin with, before I like make any argument, I just want to make clear. So since you're like focusing on name the trade so much, I assume you would reverse the same for humans, right? Like humans are part of the group we should not inflict any pain or suffering on.
Yeah, I don't want to inflict pain and suffering on humans. If we can avoid it, it's probably better to not make people feel pain and suffering. Yeah, seems reasonable.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to like clear that we are on the same side here.
Yes,
You know,
we're on
like,
the same side about not making people suffer and die and shit.
yeah,
You're right,
like
yeah.
not fully animal first vegans, but like fully consistent vegans with like human animals. They need protection too.
Yeah, I'll clarify a little thing before you continue, which is a lot of vegans take this all life is equal position. I don't. Do you hold a position like that? No. Okay, right. Because it's silly. You get into kind of philosophical problems, like if you have to kill, DM or a lobster. If you think all life is equal, presumably you'd flip a coin, right? To me, it's obvious that I care more about certain life than others. We could talk about why. It's got to do for me mostly with the kind of experience they have. But you can still say people get so lost with this. They think, as Carnists often think this too, that it's either all life is equal or it's fine to just like holocaust animals. And it's like, well, you could say all life is not equal, but a lot of life is over a certain threshold where you shouldn't fuck with it in horrible ways. So that's the kind of position I hold. In the same way as like, for people watching, I'm sure you get the idea, but just to make it clear for others, you could have $3 and $4. They're not the same amount of money, but they're both enough to buy a can of pop, right? Same idea.
I've been some fans since 7th grade.
Okay, DM,
Since we are.
Sorry, we are getting the audio problem. Can we just fix this real quick? Can you just go?
What do I do?
Yeah, so you want to go to your audio settings. It's bottom left. It's a little cog. Do you see the cog in the bottom? Click that, then go to audio and video.
Audio and voice and video, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. And then you see the voice activity is selected, and there's a little threshold. Just put it down a bit.
Okay.
You can talk a little and see where your level's at, and you just want it. Just put it a good bit below that because it keeps chopping off the start.
Is that better?
I think you put it up.
No, I put it into the other direction. It was fully in one.
It's weird because you got a bit quieter, but it doesn't sound like it's chopping you off now. Try again.
Well, let's try.
Okay, I'm just gonna raise your volume a bit on my end, but yeah, here let me just put you up. That's fine. Okay, we got rid of the clipping, but it's for some reason it lowered you. I have no clue why. I fixed it. Sorry about all that. Please continue.
Oh, I can be super loud though. So yeah, I like Bentham since 7th grade, so I'm kind of more of a utilitarian. So yeah, obviously I'm not the total anti-speciesist. I like the idea of thinking that everything is equal, but suffering is not equal, right? So
of course.
I'm onto the central nervous system for people first thing, like not people first, but the higher the central nervous system, the more I should consider those animals or humans.
Of course, yeah.
So I you are the same side, right?
Yeah, and people think that's an anthropocentric position, but they just aren't thinking clearly, because obviously if you had something that's got a more complex kind of conscious experience than a human, then you care about that more than a human.
Actually, Kant thought aliens are smarter than us.
Okay, well, I couldn't comment on that, but if it were the case, I'd value them more than humans. Oh, I'm gonna turn that sound off so we don't get any beeps. Yeah, so now let's see. So you were trying to give a bit of preamble before going into arguments. Yeah.
Yes. And first I have to clear something also. I'm not really comfortable with you using the word Holocaust while talking to me. I mean, as you heard, like my mom is German. So I think it's not useful for us vegans to use this because there's historical sensitivities. And then I think also it's intellectually not correct because the Holocaust was something to annihilate humans, right? And it doesn't matter if humans or animals, but we don't want to get rid of pigs forever. We just use them as products. So I don't really think it's the same quality. And I don't think it's useful for us instrumentally to convince others, because a lot of times once you say Holocaust, they build up a wall and they don't listen to your arguments at all anymore. So okay. I'm not 100% comfortable with the term. Also, obviously about it being horrific and so on, we are on the same page.
Yeah.
Just that I a historical thing where like we try to wipe out a race, like genocide. We're not genociding animals. We're reproducing them again and again. We don't hate them as much as we're indifferent to their suffering, I would say.
Okay, so there's kind of a few things for me here. So I really hope that that's not a stumbling block to this conversation, because I think it's otherwise a nice conversation, but I do object to virtually everything you just said. So I think the term is accurate. If you look in the dictionary, it refers to destruction or slaughter on a mass scale. If, 11 million over a period of years constitutes a mass scale, multiple billion, per year is going to certainly constitute a mass scale. And I also think that it's important to do justice to the victims, so I won't back off of calling it what it is. I don't know if that's I hope that doesn't create a stumbling block for our conversation, though.
No, I'm not so nitpicky about it. It's just the aim, the aim of the Holocaust was a total destruction and so on, the genocide. While the aim of us, doing this horrific things to animals, doing this mass killing and so on, is not to get rid of them forever, but to just use them. So I don't really think it's the same. You can go ahead and call it like that. I'm fine with it. I just needed to disclaim myself out of it because I don't really want to attach to this idea. Also, it's politically unwise for me.
Okay, well, yeah. So I understand where you're coming from. You can, of course, use language however you want. I'll make one more point about this, which is I understand that the animal Holocaust and the Nazi Holocaust differ in that the goal is extermination in one case, but not the other. But extermination isn't a necessary condition for a Holocaust if we actually look to the dictionary, which just says destruction or slaughter on a mass scale.
Well,
so
would we agree? It doesn't matter, huh?
Just one question. Would we agree that it fits the dictionary definition of a Holocaust?
It depends on which dictionary you look. So you use it, I don't use it, but I disclaimed my arguments against using it.
Okay, well, so you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. I'll just ask one more and then we can move on. So if I show you a dictionary definition that says destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, would you agree that what we're doing to animals fits that definition?
Well, from that dictionary, sure, but we all know that you can get out a different dictionary but I actually think fighting over these terms is a lot of times nothing worthwhile because it's just a matter of semantics. So I just wanted to disclaim you saying it, but at the end, it doesn't really matter to me.
Okay, you know what? I said I was only going to say one more thing, but final thing, I swear, you can have the last word on this, I promise. It's not, to me, it's not just, well, I mean, you might say it's semantics in a sense, because it's about the meaning of words, but the reason, personally, why I care about the semantics is doing justice to the victims, right? I think that it would be, now I think your motivations are good, so don't take this as an insult, but on my view, it would be disgraceful to not call this what it is. It would be like seeing someone get murdered in front of you and just say oh, that was a unfortunate incident or something. It's well, the guy got murdered, okay? Let's call it what it is. Let's not pussyfoot around with it. Okay, well, let's just agree. I'm also happy with murder, so for the sake of this conversation, I can call it murder if you want.
Murder.
All right, we'll talk about how about mass murder? Is mass murder okay?
Yeah, I actually work for a politician who's in German vegan community known for standing next to a concentration camp with a sign saying for the animals, it's every day.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he's still famous for that, negatively, that he was standing next to a concentration camp holding the sign.
Yeah. I understand your motivations, though. There's, you're involved politically. There's things about political viability, and you're, I get it. So let's continue.
Also, effectiveness of activism here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sold on those arguments, but yeah, I get that that's a concern, whether it works out or not.
On yours either.
Okay.
As long as I tell you on leftism, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Let's get into it. Did you have more preamble before the leftist arguments, or?
No, the next preamble we already have, that would be that we want to reduce as much suffering as possible.
I'll state
right?
that we
agree
do,
on that.
but it's not my fundamental goal. I'm not a negative utilitarian. Are you a negative utilitarian?
I don't know. I'm turned on that, on like making happiness and like reducing suffering. Like I think it gets like really problematic sometimes in practice.
Yeah,
So,
because we can certainly agree that reducing suffering is a goal and an extremely important goal. But what I won't say is that it's the primary or only goal. For
okay, what
example,
would your primary goal be?
I don't have a exact notion of a primary goal. I just know that I'm also concerned with things like maximizing well-being. I know I'm concerned with rights. So just to kind of give a little example of why, if you were a pure negative utilitarian, if you said my only concern is reducing suffering, if we have two possible worlds that are identical except for the following differences, one of these worlds has infinite suffering and no well-being. The other has no suffering and no well-being. You would have to say that those worlds are morally... Sorry, I messed up the analogy. You have a world with infinite well-being and no suffering. That's world 1. You have a world with no well-being and no suffering. That's world 2. On negative utilitarianism, those two worlds are morally equivalent, and that seems insane to me. They both have no suffering, so with respect to the only thing that negative utilitarianism cares about, they're equal. But one of them has infinite well-being. Shouldn't that world be better? So that's why I'm not a negative utilitarian.
Yeah, I also have some virtue ethics in me. Like sometimes
Sure.
it shines through. I like Plato also, so I'm not 100% only utilitarian. So
Sure.
um,
It's not
yeah,
it's not important that we have perfect agreement on a normative theory. I think if we have generally similar goals, which I'm sure we do, it'll probably be fine, unless you're about to deliver really specific arguments that rely like exactly on negative utilitarian ethics, which it doesn't
no,
seem like you're gonna do.
I'm actually I'm gonna start with an argument that like would make everybody agree except nihilists.
Okay, all right, let's hear it.
Because look, so we have our worlds and we have like good things and whatever you believe in is good,
Mhm.
needs needs the environment to function, right? We need to eat, we need to sleep, and so on. Otherwise, like all our rights are void. There is neither like there's neither well-being, there's no virtue, there's no rights, there's nothing interest focused. So everything good is done if our world is just fucked up, our environment, right?
Yeah, everything that I consider good seems. I mean, I guess there wouldn't be rights violations, so that would be good. But I would agree generally. Okay, it's obviously way worse if everything ends than if we create a good situation on Earth. Yes.
With food, there's not going to be any voting rights either, you know? On an empty stomach, you cannot vote. So also the rights will be like void. So I would argue that the only way you can like make a case against sustainability is if you're nihilist, and you're like fuck the world.
I don't. I don't
And
think. I don't think that's technically true. I think that you could value something like the absence of life, or you could value the destruction of the environment. There are ways you could want that aren't strictly nihilism. You don't have to value nothing. You could value something about that shitty situation.
yeah, I mean, you could be utilitarian and say like let's completely nuke the world now, so there's not any suffering left.
Well, that that
Sure.
that that would rely on a weird utility picture in my view, but yeah, I grant that you would so I won't agree that you have to be a straight up nihilist to want everything to come to an end, but I will certainly grant that you'd have to have values that I don't have. So that should probably do it for you.
Yeah, and most people don't hold. Like you have to have
Yeah,
values most people don't hold. Like even those
sure.
people that are far away from us,
Yes.
they will still value sustainability,
Yes. Of course.
right?
Yep, we agree about
Okay,
that.
so
Totally.
okay, so that's good. So we are already really far into like that. That's actually all my premises on that.
Okay, so we agree
So
that we value sustainability. It's like it's instrumental to pretty much whatever we care about, like well-being stuff like this. You gotta have a place for well-being to happen. Yeah, gotcha.
okay, and now I forgot. We also have to define left, right?
Sure.
Um,
Define left,
which,
right?
huh?
I'm sorry, I'm just
What?
being an idiot. I said define left, right. I'm kidding. Define left, yeah.
I couldn't say that anyway, wait, since I can't pronounce any R's. I should
Okay.
just talk without any R's in my language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Um,
Yeah.
so I looked like for Peter Singer wrote a book, The Darwinian Left.
Mm-hmm.
And basically he's like talking about those people that those that of us who want to change the world into like having less suffering and so on. Those are the left. So being against exploitation, violence, and oppression, not just being against it, but also enlarging the group of concern, right? For us, there will be not only the weak, but it will also be animals. Like we are trying to like bring justice to like a larger group.
So for you now we might have a little trouble with that definition of left. So for you leftism is just about wanting to create more well-being, or can you give me that definition again? What exactly is the definition?
It's basically like overcoming violence, exploitation, and oppression.
Overcoming violence, exploitation, and oppression. Because I'm trying to think, I'm trying to do credit to the right, and I don't think that right-wingers are going to say that they value oppression and violence and things like this. I think that they're going to have a different notion of what will bring about a kind of just world without those things, or they might have different notions of what those things are, but I highly doubt they would actually accept that they value things like violence or oppression.
Well, they will not say they value things, but at the end, the way they act and reinforce, it's like they maintain a system of oppression, right? You could say like right wing typically is like a smaller group, so they want all this justice and so on, but only for their own group, and typically not for like a larger group or for the others. Which is really weird when you get right wing vegans, because like like it makes
I
my
know a
head
few.
explode. Yeah, there is a few, but I would argue they haven't really understood like the philosophy behind veganism. Um,
Depends
like
how we
because
define veganism for sure, but
well, this is people here that like they want to save Romanian dogs, but they don't care about Romanian kids.
mm. Yeah. Well, I mean
And I
that.
feel inconsistent. Like I mean, the kids that's not their fault that they're born as humans and not as Romanian street dogs.
So it doesn't have to be inconsistent. Like someone could just value the one and not the other and have some kind of reason for that, but it certainly is not the kind of ethic that I have. So I don't know if you get frustrated when I nitpick philosophically, but like when I think about words like inconsistent, I'm thinking about like literally entailing a logical contradiction. So I don't see that there's a logical contradiction if someone values, dogs or Romanian dogs and not Romanian kids. But I agree that the position is like very at odds with my values.
Well, I would not find the traits you can like actually like justify it on, like I wouldn't find like I doubt anybody can make a consistent argument on like why the Romanian street dogs should be safe, but the Romanian kids um, don't. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't. I can't find it. I've not heard anybody making a good argument on why value the one and the other not. So, but it doesn't matter. Like we
Okay.
are on the same page anyway. Like when it comes to this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We
I
want to.
think you could find a consistent argument, but I think it would strike us all as evil. So I mean, whatever. We both agree it's a bad position. That's probably what matters, right?
I mean, of course, yeah. It could be really racist and so on, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
he'll
would
probably be a racist position. Yeah.
there's inconsistencies anyway, because like I actually did my anthropology thing on racism, so there will be some
Okay.
inconsistencies too, but I'm not going to get into them
Okay.
now.
Okay.
But I know there is some inconsistency
Sure.
in defining the group and so on, because there's no marker that genetics don't work, nothing works. So it's just picked out a name and then done.
That
Anyhow, but that's not
okay.
important for our discussion, right?
Sure.
It's not important. Like I could show you that those races racist. I don't call them vegan. I call them plant-based. Because for me, veganism is about reducing suffering for like all beings. And it's inconsistent also with the original definition from the 50s, right, from the Vegan Society, that said veganism is a continuation of social justice movements.
Yeah.
And it didn't say.
I'll grant you that it could be, it would be inconsistent with a definition of veganism like that. I was talking about like internal inconsistency. But yeah, if the idea is they also accept like some definition of veganism that's supposed to be, involving like equal rights or consideration for sentient beings, then of course you're going to get a contradiction of some type there. If it's like, oh, I value all sentient beings, here's a sentient being I don't value, or something like that, we'll of course get a pickle. Yeah. So we were talking about. Oh, I was just going to go back to just understanding your definition of left, because we established that we care about sustainability, instrumentally for the goals that we care about, like well-being and stuff like this. We care about sustainability, and now we're just trying to define left, right? So yeah. Yeah,
we're gonna define. Yeah, and this is like, for me, this is actually like enlarging, right? Like trying to find like more justice and equality for like a bigger group, for a larger group.
Yeah, I should say, like, I find that defining left and right is extraordinarily difficult. There was a while where I tried to find the stable underlying factor. I think that I might now be more open to a picture where it's like it's just a kind of collection of values that you have to hit, like you have to tick a certain amount of them. Like you could be a leftist who's like pro-guns, or you could be like a right-winger who's pro-environment. Like you can differ a bit, but it's kind of about having that general picture where
you, as in conserve, be pro-nature, conserve your natural ground, your homeland, and so on.
Yeah, and one more, just one more. So I was just gonna say, I kind of am starting. I'm pretty open to the picture that like it's probably a psychological thing. There's probably like it probably correlates a lot with personality. It's probably kind of a cluster of beliefs more than like one strict underlying thing that explains all the beliefs. And the final thing, I do grant though that it certainly seems to be the case that the left is more kind of like altruistic. Like the left wants to do more for everybody. They want things like, provide everyone healthcare, provide everyone education, stuff like this. So I don't know if like the fundamental value has to be something about expanding the circle, but I definitely agree that is something the left seems more concerned with.
Well, normally it is about like getting rid of hierarchy, right? Emancipation for everyone. So it kind of is, but do you know how historically why we say left and right?
You mean the very origin of it? It was about like France and which side of the king you were on or something like that. If you were pro, like I don't know the exact history. It's something like that though, right?
It's about the parliament. It's about like which parties are sitting where in the parliament. So and like there's also jokes that at one point left and right touch at the other side, right?
The horseshoe,
which is not really 100% true, because leftists tend to burn not houses but cars, property, while right wing also like has no value of human life sometimes. So it's problematic. The horseshoe is problematic, but people do say that.
Okay.
Anyhow, I think we are clear enough on what left means, right?
Yeah, and even if we disagree to some extent about like, so there's like there's how do I explain this? You could be putting forward your definition and just what you're taking left to mean, and I'm fine with that. Or you could be trying to describe the general like political phenomenon out there. I think the second one becomes this like tricky empirical question where we have to start asking like, is it the case that all they care about is expanding the circle? Like what value, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're just saying, I take a definition of the left where it's about like expanding the circle, eliminating hierarchy, stuff like this, I'm happy to just work with your definition. I know what you mean when you say left.
Yeah, I mean, there's weird people always within, right? Like I'm having this fight the whole time. Like one of the leftist thing is like to make a product out of something, the commodification, which is always an evil thing. So I'm using that against my fellow party members all the time. I'm like, what about the commodification of living beings?
Right.
And it always sounds bad to them. So then they're like, They're like,
Of
oh,
course.
my head is going.
Yeah, because they have to either say, okay, actually, I'm not categorically against commodification, or just contradict themselves. It's always wrong to commodify, but there's an instance where it's right to commodify.
I take it more, I'm always saying like, oh, so violence and exploitation is always wrong.
Except,
what about that?
right. So just before you move on, I just want to make sure I'm totally clear, because we kind of went through a few things about the left. Your, like, the fundamental definition you're going to work with for this argument is what exactly? It's removing hierarchy, expanding the circle of moral concern. Could you just define it one more time so I have it clear?
So I just said, like, kind of left as being against exploitation, violence, and oppression, and enlarging the group of concern.
Okay.
Which is not 100% relevant, because if I get you away from capitalism, you're automatically going to move to the left side because there's no other side.
Okay, I'm just writing this down. So
I'm tricking you here.
No, I don't think you're tricking me. Okay, so sustainability, and then the definition of left is you want to get rid of.
Wait, I actually looked it up for you, like what I like. Like there's wait, I actually have the quote from Peter Singer I like.
Okay.
Can I just post it here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if I zoom out to see that our DMs are going to be recorded on the stream, is that okay?
Yeah, I didn't write anything yet to you, I think.
Not so far. Okay, so, all right, here, I'll copy that into my little document. Okay. All right, so if we shrug our shoulders at the avoidable suffering of the weak and the poor, of those who are getting exploited and ripped off, or who simply do not have enough to sustain life at a decent level, we are not of the left. If we say that that is just the way the world is and will always be, and there is nothing we can do about it, we are not part of the left. The left wants to do something about this situation. Okay, yeah, so that's the definition we're working with. Sure.
Well, I like it.
Yeah, it seems yeah.
I met him in person. I liked him. Kind
of nice. Did you talk for a bit, or was it just sort of passing?
Just really briefly about that. I read his argument wrongly and like kept eating shrimps at the beginning.
Well, how did you possibly? Can I ask how? How'd you do that?
Well, I started off with reading like an Ethics to Globalization, and I saw there's an interview with Peter Singer and Richard Dawkins discussing on YouTube.
Yep.
And this actually made me vegetarian.
Oh, okay.
Because I was like, wait, I wouldn't put humans in a small whole life. What we do to animals is even worse. I wouldn't do that to something I don't like. And put them in a nice villa, like quarantine them in a villa even with somebody I don't like, right? So this brought me to there, but they were still talking about shrimps, I think. So at the beginning, I was still eating shellfish.
That's funny. Yeah, that conversation was pretty disgraceful on Dawkins' end. If I remember correctly, he just bit the bullet on saying, yeah, I'd probably just be a slave owner. It's okay, like, all right, great position there, buddy.
But it's vegetarian, so that was a plus. Like normally, I don't know if you're aware of that. Normally, rational discourse is not what makes people change. Like it's more like emotion, disgust, and health. Like very, very few people actually change, go vegan or vegetarian from the rational, like from the moral point of view.
Okay, there's a slight problem there. So I agree that a lot of the time it's not a logical argument that makes people go vegan. I don't know the exact numbers, but when you say that it's things like disgust, and then you say it's not a moral consideration, that to me that doesn't make sense, because I take like disgust to be a kind of moral consideration. I just take that to be a kind of like, I mean, I'm an anti-realist about morality. If someone's like, just disgusted by something, they find it repulsive and have an aversion to it, like I basically take that to be a kind of moral impulse. Like if they see footage and they're disgusted.
Different kinds of disgust, but you can be disgusted by, for example, like how there's like lots of gross things, lots of chemicals and antibiotics in meat.
Hmm.
So if you're disgusted by that,
Sure.
then I wouldn't say that's a moral consideration, but that's like a basic instinct, which like is for us to keep healthy, right? To like also by smell, like sometimes by smells we are disgusted, which is programmed into us, so we don't eat like from an evolutionary perspective.
I was sorry. I thought you meant
safe, no.
disgust. I thought you meant like as in like they see footage and they're just disgusted with what's happening to these animals. You don't think that's a substantial part of what makes people go vegan? The footage? Because I'll grant you, I don't think that lots of people. I don't think the majority have heard a logical argument and gone vegan. But the footage is huge. Yeah.
But that's emotion. Like
Sure.
I would say that's emotion. It's not. It takes you by your heart first, right?
Mhm.
Like I actually, to be honest, I went vegan on emotion. I went vegetarian on the moral argument, but then I went vegan on emotion. I saw like this cow running after another cow after the baby cow, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'm done with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm done with this. So, so that could have also been discussed for myself that I'm responsible for that happening. But yeah, so going back, so Peter Singer has this explanation which I like, you know, like trying to change the situation into like something which is like less suffering. And now I argue that capitalism will destroy the world. Hence, we need to be anti-capitalist.
Okay, so that I'm not convinced of.
Yeah, I'm happy you're not convinced. That would be really boring if you now already said.
Well, yeah, I'm just stating it so we know where the things are we have to argue about. Like, if you say like, okay, so first of all, we care about sustainability, I'm gonna be like, yes, we care about that. If you say, okay, and now we're against capitalism, I'm gonna be like, okay, wait, that's one we have to have a discussion about. I'm not sold on that. Now, I should say, I don't have some particular attachment to capitalism. I don't really care. I'm sort of for whatever brings about the best outcomes. I'm not like a capitalist ideologue or something like this. But I'm not actually currently, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it, but I'm not currently convinced that a shift away from capitalism is going to maximize well-being, for example, or reduce suffering, or, you know, improve rights or something like this.
If I can't convince you today, I'm going to spam you with stuff.
Okay.
Just already letting you know. You have two choices. You can be convinced, or you're going to get spammed.
Oh, I already regret opening the DM. Now it's just going to be a infinite list. Nah, okay. So yeah, what's the rationale for thinking capitalism will destroy the world? Because look, if we set it up like an argument, like if capitalism will destroy the world, you should be against capitalism. Capitalism will destroy the world, therefore you should be against capitalism. I have no problem with P1, okay? If it's going to do that, I'm against it. So it's just that empirical claim, the second one, that it's going to destroy the world. Now, I will grant you, if we talk about, like, unrestricted capitalism or something, we all understand there's, like, a profit motive. The environment is not going to be a concern unless there's some, like, profit-based reason to care about it, which seems unlikely. So I don't have any reason to think that the world is going to, like, I mean, we're going to seriously fuck the environment if we move to, like, laissez-faire capitalism or something like this. So I grant that, but what I'm not convinced of is that a kind of capitalism with proper like regulation and restriction and stuff like this would destroy the world.
Slavoj Žižek calls it, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he's like a pop philosopher.
Roughly.
Yeah, he calls it capitalism with a human face.
Yeah, I've heard that term.
Like to have you have heard that term?
I've heard the term, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like you can argue that like there's an argument that capitalism needs to kind of mask itself, like needs to mask the biggest atrocities, because otherwise people would actually revolt and change the system. So capitalism cannot be fully unleashed, because then there will be a revolution. So what capitalism instead does is what Starbucks does, you know, like you go there with a feel-good feeling, you give a little more for your coffee, and then you think workers are going to be paid well, and so on. So there is like also in Germany there's a system, it's called like social market system. But all of this, like even I would argue, even in the capitalism put on brakes, or however you want, we like restrained, however you want to phrase it,
Sure.
there is still an inherent logic to it, right? You can put it like on a leash, but you still have like a certain logic that will still remain there. So when you say, yeah, of course, pure capitalism is going to destroy it, but we could like start internalizing the costs. You talked about externalization of costs, but I would argue the thing is, externalization of costs is the main thing of capitalism, because you have the capital and then you want to make profit, right? You need to make profit. You need to accumulate wealth and grow. So there's first in capitalism, it's eternal growth, which is like, it has to be ever growing, like GDP and so on, which is an economic argument economists are still fighting about, because the idea is like so this is canon. So the canon is that a company needs to always grow and invest, because there's like it's going to invest and it's going to have credits and so on. So there's a motion that any company needs to grow, which as I said, that's the canon, but there's people fighting about that, say we could have capitalism, but companies don't have the necessity to grow. But so you have a system where you, let's say, have any product or so on, and you have a company and you want to maximize profit, right? Because this is the main point about capitalism. So in order to maximize profit, what you can do is like put the cost somewhere else, which would be the externalization of costs. So I would argue it's actually inherent to capitalism. It's not something you can say, okay, we are going to start to, maybe water is not going to be for free anymore. So the company has to start paying water. Then you say, okay, we're going to introduce a carbon tax. Okay, so those things are going to be internalized. Those are not going to be externalized costs anymore. But the logic for the company is still that it has to make profits, right? It has to find some area where it can actually like cut costs, and most of the times cut costs and transfer the costs onto somebody else, most likely all of us, nature, or factory farming animals, right? Like
you know what? I think Didem, just for people who are listening, I think it might just be worth explaining externalization, and also so I make sure I have the concept right. So it's the idea is that you're as the capitalist, you are displacing the cost that you would otherwise pay onto someone else. So for example, the Smithfield Pork Company has, I think they were the biggest producer in the States, or still are. They've polluted the water to such an extent, and we start asking why. Like, why is there so much water going off into these lakes nearby? And it seems that the rationale that is probably going on here is just cheaper to do this than to install proper sewage or proper waste management or whatever. And regardless of whether that's a perfectly true example, I don't know all the details there. The idea is that they want to minimize costs. The thing that would be clearly better for everyone would be if they were to install the sewage, but it's cheaper for them to put it into the water, and then the cost gets paid by everyone else, either in their healthcare or in their own tax dollars to clean the water or something like this. Is that like the general idea?
Or you like transfer your business into an Asian country where you don't pay the workers, and like they easily die because of malnutrition or so on. So this, which is actually called pollution leakage. If you consume here, but the costs are in another country, which is also an externalization, right? So this is basically it. So to put the cost on somebody else.
Yeah, the fundamental definition. I guess I gave more of an example than a definition, but the definition is just you take a cost that you would pay and you displace it onto someone other than yourself. Okay, and
so the price is not true. Like a lot of times they talk about true prices, which would be internalizing all the costs. Which then we can, as vegans, we can say, well, animal products never can have a true cost because there's a life inside, right?
Mm.
So this is like the grossest externalization of costs you can imagine as an animal product,
Mm.
at least in my universe.
Yeah, I sometimes try to think through what the externalization is. Yeah, so the externalization, I don't understand what's being externalized. I understand the person paying the price is the animal who dies. But okay, yeah, so the idea would be
so
like to
something die for your pleasure. That's super externalized price, you know.
yeah, so I guess if you look at like
Anyhow,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
it's not super important. Like, it's just in my mind, this is like the grossest, because a lot of times in the arguments around the environment, people are like, okay, let's have everything priced in, and that's a little bit ridiculous, you know. If you talk about internalization of costs, and then there's some animal product that gets ridiculously expensive, so it has a nature cost inside, but it doesn't have the animal cost inside, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah,
So there's
yeah.
which we now we can actually see that there's also a limit to internalizing costs, right? Because in an animal product it wouldn't function. Like we would both agree that an animal product can never have the true costs of this product inside. Like
I
you
mean,
cannot put a price value on some life.
that assumes that there's no value on life, that life has infinite value. Like, I think what I'd be closer to saying is that, like, if it were to have a true cost, it would be just insanely exorbitant. Like, it would be absolutely ridiculously high. I don't want to say that it couldn't have a true cost, because that would imply that life has infinite value. I don't think life has infinite value.
Yeah, but we're gonna come to monetary, like thinking as a cognitive scheme. It's really problematic, and that's the capitalist society we all grew up in. Like you probably way even more than I did, because the US is way more capitalist and like anti-Marxist and so
I'm in
on.
Canada.
But that, huh? You're in Canada?
Yeah, I'm not in US, I'm in Canada.
Okay. Yeah, lucky you. So okay, that's why you made the point about healthcare.
The point about what?
So you're not locked in.
Sorry,
you made a point that you like healthcare.
that I like. I can't.
Said, like,
It's your accent. I can't tell what word you're saying. That I like what?
Healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay, yeah,
healthcare.
Gotcha. Yeah, of course. Yeah, our healthcare is it's good here. I mean, the wait times. I guess there's some complaints you can make, but yeah, it's way better than. I mean, the U.S. just seems fucked in terms of healthcare. I'd way rather have what we have here.
And what is the problem? Unleashed capitalism. With healthcare.
Is that the problem, or is the problem? Okay, I'd have to think about that, but I won't. I won't do it right now. Yeah.
I take that argument really quickly because it fits in the same scheme. Because it's about so something that everybody profits is a merit good. Okay, so something like everybody profits. Like if you're healthy, I'm going to, and we hang out, I'm going to profit because you're not going to make me sick. So if you have good health care, we're not all going to get sick. So even other people. So there's actually the benefits are externalized also.
Okay.
For the merit good.
Sure.
So with Corona, you could actually see that because of capitalism and the profit motive, we have outsourced the production of masks, outsourced the production of gloves, and so on, that sanitary stuff to like China, to Taiwan, wherever, right? And that's the logic of capitalism, because it's cheaper to produce somewhere else. But it would have been beneficial for all of us if it was actually still produced locally, because then we would, like, in the case of emergency, we would have our hands on. Second thing, all the countries that have.
I'm a
you
bit.
Don't agree with this?
I don't know about that. Because it sounds like. I agree that it would be better to have a stockpile, so we had the equipment there, absolutely. But that stockpile could have been produced elsewhere. I don't understand why it's better to produce it locally than somewhere else. That's not clear to me. But I do agree it's better to have a stockpile than to not have a stockpile.
Well, the stockpiles would have been gone very quickly, you know. Like there's also and like without globalization and the global transportation, even if you have a stockpile, if now some countries are totally locked out, right? Like the US, Americans cannot go anywhere.
Sorry, could I just ask
the
why?
Connections are not there.
Could I just ask why is it better to produce it locally than to produce it, or why is it better to produce locally than somewhere else? Like maybe we can produce more of it elsewhere for cheaper or something.
You're independent of supply chains.
Why is that
and
better?
You're also like if you stockpile it and your stockpile is gone, and as a country you want to like keep your hospitals running, you will have to compete on the global market with other countries, which actually happened. Countries were fighting for the masks. Like the US confiscated some masks for Germany and so on, because the US was not willing to pay a higher price, but Germany was willing to pay a higher price. So actually, the US exported even masks to Germany while they were like in urgent need. So yeah, you could say, okay, let's say it's not important if it's produced locally, but from a sustainability point, it doesn't need to be transported. So there would be better. But let's focus also. There's also the healthcare system, right? Hospitals that have to run on a profit will have a different capacity of like oxygen masks and so on than hospitals that are not going by profit motive. Hospitals that are running on a profit motive have to always calculate how many beds should we have empty, right? They should always need to calculate how can we run a profit with how many beds. But then if you have a surge of hospital beds needed, there will be a like way lower capacity.
So
you understand the part?
I'm not. I understand that it is worse to have a hospital that's not prepared for everybody. Like obviously, what we want is for our healthcare system to be concerned with everyone. Like my problem with private healthcare is, as far as I understand, people who have trouble affording it get fucked over. That's like the issue I take. But if there's some argument about how it's like predicted on private healthcare that there would be less capacity, like lower surge capacity or something, that I don't totally understand what the argument is there.
So during like a pandemic or during a like crisis, right? If you cannot like cope with the spikes, because like in Germany, until the 90s, hospitals were not allowed to turn a profit. After they became like privatized, I don't know in Canada if you have private hospitals or not, but like here, about like 2/3 of the hospitals are private, and the other ones are university hospitals, which are state-run. So you can see by the beds that they have, by the kind of like operations they do. Like some operations pay better, they have more profits, so they specialize to a certain thing, like giving birth, for example, in Germany doesn't pay well, so some areas don't have any hospitals anymore where you can give birth. They will not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd need to see the exact data, but yeah, I would picture something like this happening, though, where it's like, if there's a profit motive, you'd see hospitals gearing themselves towards like the most profitable procedures that they can offer. Or, even like the surge capacity, they would probably try to, like, if it's an extra expense to have more surge capacity, then if it's an extra expense, it's going to be something we try to avoid doing, right? If you have some like state-run hospital where the standards are set and you have to have a given surge capacity, then the fact that it costs more to do it is kind of beside the point. So I don't know which of these exactly pan out empirically. That's like a data question, but I do agree with this general picture that you're painting, though. That like, it's going to be better for people.
There's data that Germany did very well because we still have those state-run hospitals.
Okay.
So there is some data already from 2 months or 3 months ago, and you can also globally look which countries kind of cope well. A lot of times they're the countries that have like better functioning health systems. Anyhow.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not doubting that the data exists. Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not doubting that the data exists. I'm just saying I'm not currently aware of it. It's just not something I've looked into. But yeah, I agree with the general picture
Also, I
you're
don't
painting.
want to
Yeah.
spam you with data.
Sorry, say again?
I don't want to spam you with data. I don't want to spam you with data either. So,
Well, spam all you want if it's relevant to one of the points you're making. I mean, I don't think it's ideal to look at it right now, but I can go over it with someone who's competent to analyze it and stuff like this. So yeah.
yeah, so you have to trust my word on this.
Yeah, I'm taking your word for the sake of argument here on empirical points. Yeah.
Okay, so and then we also agree that like capitalism kind of like advertises an individualistic culture. You go and you buy, and social relations kind of go away. You pay for stuff.
Sorry, Didem, before we go on to talking about capitalism and whether it promotes an individualistic culture, just on the health point, see, this is one of those things where I don't understand why we would assume that this problem can't be fixed under capitalism. So, like, I get the idea. Like, if the idea is we're always trying to externalize costs, we're always trying to reduce how much we pay, it's kind of like if you're trying to keep someone, like, this is an analogy, the person is capitalism, okay? You're trying to, like, keep them trapped in a room. They're always going to try to find a way out. They try to go out the window, it's like you shut the window. They try to tunnel out, you put concrete through the bottom. They try to, like, chip away at one of the walls, you reinforce the walls with steel, right? But what it sounds like you're saying is that there is nothing that can just keep them in the fucking room, and that's kind of what I'm not convinced of. So now to move away from the analogy and talk just exactly about the healthcare thing, I don't understand why... just let me make this one point, then you can destroy everything I just said. So I just don't understand why with the healthcare it wouldn't be the case that we could just put regulations in place that like force hospitals to have a certain surge capacity, that force them to perform certain procedures or have a certain ability to perform a certain amount of those procedures. Why couldn't we do that kind of thing?
Okay, if it doesn't turn a profit anymore, no private company is going to do it. So
what if there's a regulation?
Too many regulations, right? If we put too many regulations, right? Mm-hmm. If they say, okay, if we have to do this and this and this, we cannot run a business anymore. It will be non-profitable. So there's a line, right? Mm. We agree on that. If you put too many regulations, they will be like, okay, this is too expensive.
Yeah, like people won't want to go into the business. It's just not profitable. Is that the idea?
Yeah, people will not. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, and we all both agreed that healthcare is like something substantial. So it's if we put too many regulations, it's going to fall into the hands of the state. And I would argue the state should already care for healthcare, and it should not be in private hands.
Yeah.
So I say with your argument, about the windows and jumping out, right? Obviously, you will have not black and white, but grayness. So obviously, there's going to be a point where we might say, okay, this can work, and then we can fight about with other people if we can still call it capitalism or not, right? Mm-hmm. Like, at which point is it not capitalism anymore, but a different economic system? Or
I see the point. Yeah, so your idea is that once you put enough, barriers on the room, then you just can't call it capitalism anymore. So, okay, so I understand what you're trying to say there. I'm not totally sold that the amount of barriers required in some of these areas actually are going to qualify the system as no longer capitalist, but I understand the point you're trying to make there. And I think I want to concede on the healthcare point, because if the idea is that with healthcare, if you put too many regulations in place, then there won't be an interest in doing business. Now, that's an empirical point. I don't know if that's exactly true, but let's just assume that's the case. The cost, the idea of it just turning into a situation where no one performs healthcare, that's obviously unacceptable. We can't have that. So I'm for healthcare being like government, supported and managed and stuff. But with another example, like something like, the production of like cars or something like this, right? That's that's going to create pollution. That's going to create problems. There's going to be issues we have with how car production happens under capitalism, Right, but this seems like a better candidate case for like why not just put regulations in place? If it becomes more expensive to produce a car, then, so be it. And if people, care enough about cars to pay for them, then there'll be, a business there, and if they don't, then there won't. So I guess I don't understand in a case like that, where it's not some fundamental thing everyone, must have access to, like healthcare. I guess with a case like that, I'm confused why we would think that it's impossible to just regulate properly. But I think I concede on the healthcare point, though.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so good. I have one area already done. So if you have like, I would argue that by the ecological footprint, if you actually try to internalize everything into cars cannot happen anymore. Like if you're really serious with the climate science and so on, but this is a different matter. Let's say cars are not that bad as they are. Let's just assume car production is still possible, or assume like another thing. Maybe vegetables, right? Vegetables have to be done.
I don't want to do it with. I don't want to do it with food. I don't think that I'm going to hold this kind of position for anything like healthcare or food or like necessities that have to be provided for people.
So just just things we don't need, right?
I think I'm just going to be talking about the majority of like commodities, just like a car, a bed, a guitar, an air conditioner, like any of this kind of shit, probably. With those things, my view is I'm not clear why we would need a non-capitalist system to produce them sustainably. I don't see why a regulated capitalist system couldn't produce those things sustainably. With the things like healthcare, I'm more open to like, I guess it's still maybe it's possible, but it's like a chance I don't want to take. It's like with healthcare, people just fucking have to have healthcare, and it's not something to be like fucked around with, really.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with true prices, we are like such over consumerist culture that we don't realize that most things true prices are so expensive that those wouldn't exist anymore. Yeah, if we really factor everything in. Right?
Okay, I guess I'm not sure of that, because that obviously I'm sure you have data, but that is something I'd have to be like convinced of.
I'm going to give you an example now. So
before you do, can I? Before you do, because I think I'm seeing some of your point. I'm just only cutting in because I think I'm going to like give some ground to your position. So if the way that it does work out, if the data pans out such that in order to control for the kind of externalities that we have a problem with, the price of things will become so exorbitantly high that we won't be able to have a good standard of living. If that's actually how it works out, and it doesn't work out that way under whatever system you're proposing, then I would grant your case. So I understand the logic if that's what you're trying to do, and then it would just be a question of persuading me that it is empirically the case that production of most of our goods in a way that's sustainable under capitalism would raise the prices to a point that no one can afford it and we wouldn't have a good quality of life. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, so I grant the logic, it's just that empirical point I would have to be persuaded of, but I see the logic of the argument now.
I'm going to give you the empirics on that.
Okay, although I'm a bit of a noob with empirical stuff, so what I'll have to do is whatever data you give, I'm gonna have to basically go over it with someone who's competent to like look into the data and like help me go through it all and stuff like this. But yeah, for the sake of argument, I'll just grant all the data that you give. Okay, what is this? How bad are bananas? Okay. All right.
So I found somebody who is competent with lots of data.
Oh yeah, sorry. I hope you don't have. Sorry, I'm not implying that you're not competent with data. I'm implying that like I need to sit there with someone and spend a lot of time going through this. Like when someone gives me like health data, I usually go to Avi and I get him to help me go through it all. But yeah, the implication was not that you're not competent with data. Yeah. Just to be clear.
Okay. Full disclosure, those are like chemistry and like climate science, and I'm a political scientist, so
right.
I have to trust other people's and their regression models and like assume it's right. Look how many disclaimers they have. The more disclaimers they have, the more likely I believe what they're writing. The more the more unsure they sound, the more logically it sounds to me. So so given into that, actually, even experts on carbon footprinting, they really fight about that. And you probably, I'm going to give an example, which is actually good for vegan activism. So there's a standard, which is, I think, FAO, that says animal agriculture is 16.5% of global GHG emissions. Right? You know this, like 16.5.
I've heard these kind of figures. Sure.
There's the World Watch Institute that says 51%. And then you're like, that. What? One is 16.5%, and the other one is 51%. That's such a huge difference. Particularly if you want to make a vegan advocacy argument and convince other environmentalists that they need to be vegan in order to be actual environmentalists, right?
Yes.
So this is really important. So the one study that is like really low, they just calculated, I guess, how much cows fought and maybe a little bit of transportation. The 51%, what they did is they calculated, so they actually internalize everything that goes into, including the fact that we burn down rainforests and release all these gases, and then the fact that there's no trees anymore. Also, these trees don't take any gases out of the air, right? So the 51% is like a really comprehensive number where they really factored in transportation of animal feed, burning rainforests, no more trees, and so on, and then they come to 51%. I talked one time to one of the IPCC experts, like they were giving a press release, and I was at a buffet asking him if he thinks this 51% could be true, because I think IPCC was using 25%. And he actually said, like really shyly, yeah, he thinks it's probably true. Animal agriculture might amount to 51%. So given that, let's say animals are innate objects. They don't have any feelings, right? We bred them to an extent that there's no consciousness, nothing. They're basically brain dead. Even then, if we try to put the whole environmental price into them, right? Then we would have, then we can't consume animal products, because still it would destroy our environment so badly that in the future we cannot live here anymore, that it's unsustainable.
Yeah,
I calculated, I used the numbers of the German ministry, and I assumed somebody is eating 300, can you do grams? Yeah, Canada's metric, right?
Yeah, except we talk about our height and our weight in imperial for some weird reason, but yeah.
Okay. So for the sake of annoying all those people that say we can ecologically consume meat, I calculated for them that if you eat 300 grams of chicken, 300 grams of beef a week, and every day 20 grams of cheese, that will be 10% of a person's carbon budget for the whole year. Just that.
Yeah, that's shocking.
Just the consumption of those three things. And that's not a lot, right?
That's really not much.
And 300...
That's like two little deli slice packs.
And I just used the official numbers. I used the number from a UN study that says every person in the world has actually 3 tons of CO2 emissions to pollute, right? Every year. This is what Earth can carry. Actually, it might be even by now 2% because it's a study, 2 tons because it's a study from 2011. They're really scarce. Like, nobody wants to talk about how much a person actually has as a budget. People don't want to talk about that. So I just used that, and then I used the official ministry, how much ecological, right? It was organic beef and chicken. Like, conventional is even worse. So given that, most of our consumption is like so far away from what is sustainable. You cannot calculate, you cannot factor a price in. So I would make exactly the argument you said. That would convince you if you say that everything is going to get too pricey and that it actually cannot be consumed anymore. This guy actually put a price on a human life, a carbon price. So he said every 150 tons of CO2 a human dies in the future, like, right? He's looking at demography and climate change and effects and so on. And he said, well, we can kind of say every 150 tons a human dies. If a new car...
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So if your new car is like 32 tons of CO2, I read this one time. It's a standard number, something like 20 or 30 tons to produce, just a car to produce. So in your example, this car, let's say 20 tons, that's still 15 years of my consumption. So how are we going to factor that into the price if it's 15 years of my consumption? I would argue it's not possible.
What I kind
of product. So
what
they can.
Sorry to cut off. What I almost want to do now is I feel like I have a understanding of the structure of this decently well. So I almost want to try to write this argument out so that we can really dial in on it. So it's kind of like if we don't internalize costs under capitalism, then we can't continue sustainably. Maybe we can't live sustainably. And I'll show this to you after, and you can correct me where I'm wrong. I'm just trying to capture the reasoning, because it really helps me to get the reasoning laid out super clearly, because then I can know exactly where it is that like the issue is, if there is an issue. If we do internalize costs under capitalism, then we can't have a good standard of living. If we can't, okay, so then either we internalize costs or we don't, and then if we can't live sustainably and or we can't have a good standard of living, then we need another system. So then, I guess conclusion, therefore we need another system. I'm not sure if that's gonna come out valid or if I fucked that up, but I know it could easily be made valid, so just 1 second. Or R. Okay, 1 second. Q and or S implies EQRST. Therefore T. Okay, I'm pretty sure that'll be valid. I'll just have to look at it, but I think this is basically the kind of thing you're saying, right? Can you tell me if that's basically what your argument is? And while you do that, I'm just gonna make sure that's valid. I might have fucked up the form.
Well, P2 is we're fucked, we're dead. There's no good standard of living. It's like done. The end.
Yeah, that's okay. I did set that up right. So okay, yeah, let's So yeah, we can like go through it, but if this is the reasoning, then I definitely am getting the kind of idea you're saying. So So just
sounds about right. But I have a couple of other dimensions that are like cognitive and moral dimensions.
Okay, but
because
before
what we are
but before we get into those, is it okay if we just clear up this roughly?
yes,
So
I'm just saying that.
Yeah, there's more to your case. This isn't the extent of it. Gotcha. Noted. Understood. So if we don't internalize costs under capitalism, then we can't live sustainably, right? That's your whole idea of like, if we don't internalize them, we're just going to be polluting the water and causing fucking suffering in other parts of the world, and it's just gonna yeah, like we won't be, we'll just keep emitting greenhouse gases to a ridiculous degree, etc. If we do internalize the costs, then we can't have a good standard of living, because then everything costs so much that no one can afford everything or anything, and no one wants to go into business, right? If we internalize all the costs, then everything costs so much no one can buy it. Yeah, so we could.
Things would not exist.
Yeah.
I would make you private yacht.
Yeah, and the idea is we would have a shitty standard of living, right? Like we can't have we can't have like an air conditioner, we can't have a car, because A, we couldn't afford it, and B, no one would like want to produce it anymore, right? Okay, so then the third premise is just either we internalize or we don't, right? Like that seems pretty straightforward. It's just one or the other. And then the P4 is just it's kind of going off of like the consequence in those first two premises. It's like if we can't live sustainably and or we can't have a good standard of living, those are both the consequences of internalizing or not. So if either of those consequences happen, then we need another system. And then the conclusion is just we need another system. Is that like roughly what you're trying to put forward here?
The thing is, if we want to live sustainable, we don't have a good standard of living from any of our points, because we are living way too luxurious. Like, people are not honest about it. Unfortunately, nobody's really honest about how fucked we are. So I have a problem with good standard of living. But yeah, we can, for the argument's sake, we can keep that.
Well, I mean, we could dial it in more if you want, but like this is kind of. So here's like what I would say to this. So I guess that P1 and P2, okay, so if we don't internalize costs, then we can't live sustainably. I'm not totally... wait, no, I do agree with that. Yeah, if we don't internalize costs, then we just have crazy shit like the environment getting destroyed. So I definitely, P1, agree. No problem. That's fine. P2, if we do internalize costs, then we can't have a good standard of living. That one I'm not sold on. That's one of the ones that we need like data to bring me around on. Yep, I know, you got your data. Premise 3, of course I agree with that. You either internalize or you don't, right? Like, sure. And then premise 4, I think I might also have a little trouble there. So if we can't live sustainably, or we can't have a good standard of... Well, no, I think I agree with that, actually. Yeah, if we can't live sustainably or we can't have a good standard of living, then we need another system, clearly. So I think the big hang-up here is going to be P2. I would just need to be shown that internalization will basically just fuck everything up. Because right now, it's not clear to me that we couldn't just internalize these things, aka just like create some reasonable restrictions and then have capitalism, but in a way that's like functional. So there's that. And then further than this, the conclusion is that we need a new system, but it's not clear what that system is. So we'd also then need a further argument for what we would want instead and how it will solve these problems. Does that all sound reasonable enough, how I'm kind of reacting to this? Okay. All right. Okay, yeah, let's, so I don't know how you want to continue. Do you want to deliver your other arguments about morality and stuff? Do you want to sort of go over some of the data for P2, or do you want to start talking about what this alternative system that you're concluding we need would be?
I'm really convinced about P2. Like, I have no doubt that you are going to come back after looking at it with saying, okay, you're so right, we're so screwed, we consume so much. Because I actually also on the Vegan Summer Festival, I give the workshops on ecological footprint. So I feel really sure about this part. Like, I give people shit about it all the time.
Yeah, well, just label it when you spam me stuff, so I know what you're giving data for. But just be like data for P2, and then just give me whatever the fuck you need, and yeah, I'll make an effort to go through it as best I can.
But I guess given this 50% study you already know, we can assume that animal products are not part of P2 anyway.
Let me just
cost
look.
Cannot analyze.
Yeah, animal products. We just agree that of course, because the cost of a life is so high, there's no internalization there that would possibly be affordable. It would have to be that somehow like so much money is there that you could afford to like, I don't know, like get rid of like all diseases and like create like a fucking utopia. It's like there's no that's not there's no way to internalize that. So I agree with animal products 100%. But I'm already a vegan, so you don't need to convince me of that. So yeah, I think maybe what might be best, unless like if you want to go in a different direction, that's fine. But P2, I think the best way to proceed with that is just, after this is over, just shoot me a bunch of your sources. But I am, if you want to talk more about it now, we can. But the other areas of focus for me are, I'd be interested in your conclusion. If we need another system, what exactly are you proposing and how does it address these problems? So that's one way we can go. Or the other that you kind of suggest is that you just have straight up different arguments about like morality and stuff. So we could get into those, or we could talk about the conclusion, or we can do the data for P2. Whatever is kind of best for you. Or if you have some other thing that you want to talk about that I didn't just list there.
No, I would like to give you some more arguments, and then if you want another time, I will give you an idea what I would like as a policy.
Sounds good to me.
That kind of also depends on that you actually got the scope of P2, because in order to like set up my other system that would be necessary, we have to agree on P2.
Yeah, now we can, if we do want to talk about that, we can just proceed under the assumption that P2 cashes out. But I mean, if you'd rather just talk about your other arguments, that's fine also. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I should go for the other arguments.
Sure.
That I just want to push you to the left. It's okay if you like you're still young, you can become a socialist in your 30s.
I'm not that. How old do you think I am? If you had to guess.
I think your Instagram said 92, so
I guess that's cheating. Okay, whatever.
30?
No, yeah? 27, but no, you just know it because of my birthday, but okay.
Well, yeah, some wiki article. I didn't do extensive research. I know your name.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not hard to research my birthday. It's in my Instagram, so yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think you've done extensive digging into me.
So how old am I?
Oh, I want to say 30s. I don't know. Am I off? Am I on? Yeah.
30s.
Oh, you're trying to get me to guess more? You want me to go further? Oh man.
Yeah, go further.
I'm gonna say like maybe like 33?
36 almost.
Okay, all right. I'd rather go under than over, right?
I don't have good light. You can't see any wrinkles.
No, you're great. Yeah. It's all good.
So also me doing philosophy and doing my PhD, that's like already a while ago. I'm kind of a nerd. If you haven't figured yet.
No, it's good. I like it. It's fun to talk about things like this, so I get it.
Okay, so cognitive argument, and also I feel it as my mission to like get other vegans to the right ideological side, so we can like be stronger together and convince people with like more sound arguments. So I see what you're doing, and it's like not so far off from what I do, except that I'm like the super leftist.
Yeah, the domain's a bit different, but both of us are interested in kind of like improving the quality of like arguments and discourse and stuff. Sure.
And also, no, I fight with leftists that are not vegan, and I fight with vegans that are not leftists.
Oh, before we talk about the arguments, we have to talk about that for a second. Because I get in arguments sometimes with non-vegan leftists, and it's the worst. Like, I don't know, again, I know you haven't really looked into my stuff, but have you seen any of my other talks than the one with Mike? Like, did you see my talk with Vosh, or my talk with Xander? Actually, with Xander, it was pretty okay. Or with Destiny. You want to
hear about the Vosh bullshit? I can tell you, like, so there's a standard he's using this thing, so as far as I know, it's Adorno. You cannot live a just life in the false system. I'm probably translating it wrong, but he wrote it in German, so it's fine.
Yeah. The way he would say it, Vosh will say no ethical consumption under capitalism, but you have the direct translation. Sure.
But this derives from you cannot live a right life under the wrong system. That's the basic point. So I hear this all the time, and it's ridiculous because on that part, I could go out, I wrote you that, and rape somebody and be like, well, I could live morally under the system anyway.
Yeah. Who cares, right? Like, it's all unethical.
Yeah, if everything is unethical, like, why even do anything? Why don't I go outside and kill? There's murder happening everywhere, right? Our system is full of violence. Since I can't live a right life, why not be violent?
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
There is no merit to this argument. I understand that, like, and I'm going to kind of come to the mindset. So part of the argument is, like, the cognitive thing, right? We all internalize capitalism and we internalize this oppressive system, individualistic system, and we're all connected. So any action you do is kind of wrong. But yeah, you already see it's kind of inconsistent.
I'm sorry, I might not be following. Inconsistent in what sense? Actually, before we go into this, before we go right into the argument, can I just say one more thing on the topic of no ethical consumption? Yeah. So did you see my talk with Xander yesterday? No. Okay, that's fine. There's a really weird thing though, because Vosh and Xander. Let's just talk about Vosh, I guess. When he says there's no ethical consumption, he's a utilitarian, right? So he actually has to have, like, an argument that shows that all consumption reduces utility, right? And he's not got an argument like that. He's not shown that at all, right? So it's like either you have to abandon that claim that all consumption is unethical, or you have to abandon utilitarianism, or you have to have an argument that shows that all consumption generates negative utility.
Also, it's not possible, right? Like, let's say, let's go back to fruits that have no bad environmental impact.
Okay.
We are in a capitalist system. We have the price fully internalized. I go to the farmer directly. I pay the farmer. There's no middleman. It's still capitalism. The farmer chooses the price. There's demand and supply and so on. The farmer gets a profit. I don't see what's unethical about it. I mean, you could say, by giving money, I am maintaining the system. But that's so far derived from it, you know. I'm maintaining the system because I'm participating in monetary exchange.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the thing is, like, you'd have to actually... If the idea is to break the system by boycott, you'd actually need to have some reason to believe it's possible to get enough people on board with that boycott to think that's actually, like, a morally good action, right? Like, if it's just going to be you boycotting and it doesn't actually have any effect, like, it doesn't actually make the system break or something, it's like, what good is it doing?
You cannot boycott, you're in the system. And also even boycott, that would be us, right? We're vegans. We boycott animal cruelty.
There's a big distinction with vegan, though, because the whole thing is that these people who the goal of boycotting is to end capitalism. That's distinct from veganism because that boycott doesn't have a payoff until a certain amount of people do it, and it's a huge amount of people, right? An amount of people that there's no reason to expect would ever engage in a boycott like that. Veganism is distinct. There's a incremental benefit to whatever degree you boycott. It's not like a threshold you have to hit that's way the fuck up here. So I think there's actually a disanalogy.
I'm not arguing that. I'm saying they would have to, if they go on the boycott side, they would have to agree with us. Not that we are doing the same, but if they do believe boycotting is helpful to destroy the system, why not start with boycotting animal products?
Okay, I understand. Yeah, you're saying, okay, so I follow you. I thought you were trying to say the logic I just gave would apply to veganism, and then there wouldn't be a reason to boycott animal products, which I think there's a disanalogy. But no, you're just saying if they are for boycotting, they should be for, why wouldn't you be for boycotting animal products? And there's one other thing I want to say about this before the cognitive argument. I'll see if I can remember it in like 10 or 15 seconds, and if I can't, we'll just go on. It was about consumption under capitalism, whether it's ethical or not. Oh yeah. So the other thing is, like, I would make the argument, like, so I'm not convinced that it's unethical even in cases that seem on their face worse than the farmer's market case, right? So take buying from a sweatshop in Indonesia, right? We can all agree that a sweatshop is a bad situation, right? Like, we don't, it's suboptimal, obviously. Maybe bad is too strong on certain theories, but clearly work conditions should be better than they are in a sweatshop. I'm sure we all agree about that. But the idea that boycotting the sweatshop is somehow the right thing to do, that doesn't follow directly from the condition in the sweatshop being suboptimal. It's not clear what the argument is there, right? If you boycott, why would you expect that to make things better? Okay, I understand those people are in a bad situation, but people tend to work the best jobs they have access to, right? If you defund that industry through a boycott, what actually happens to those people? It's, as far as I can tell, they end up in a worse situation where they're working some other job and making less money or doing shittier work. So even with the sweatshop boycott, it's not clear to me that it's actually a good thing to do.
It depends on how you can like structure it. There's this really like famous example where in Pakistan they were making footballs for, do I have to say soccer balls?
I thought you meant footballs, yeah. That's funny.
Soccer balls for Nike, and Nike has like this pressure campaign because of child labor. So Nike stopped it. And next to but making a soccer is like, actually you have to learn something. It's a skilled labor. Not super skilled, obviously, but it's skilled labor.
Sure.
Next to this factory that then closed for children, there was a brick factory. So
sorry, I didn't understand. A what factory?
Bricks.
Brick? Like house brick? Yeah, okay.
Like mortar, yeah.
Gotcha, yeah.
So there was a brick. So Nike closed for the kids. Kids went to the next factory and started working there.
Exactly.
Which would be a good example for you now, huh?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because the obvious solution is those countries actually have to be pressured in some way, or maybe they do it internally, whatever. They have to change the way their labor regulations are. There's no reason to think, I mean, I'm open to it, but I haven't been given a good argument. I've not been given a good reason to think that boycotting things like sweatshops actually makes the world a better place. It sounds counterintuitive, because what people do is they go, sweatshop bad, boycott must be good. But really that doesn't follow.
Who did the boycott argument? Because it doesn't fit the ethical consumption under the wrong system.
I don't think that I've not actually heard a clear argument. It just seems like they go they go sweatshop bad, boycott must be good. I don't think that they actually have a logic there, really. It's just like, you should avoid paying for something if it's not a condition that you like. But the real thing you have to do is consider what happens on the alternative if you defund it, and if that's something that you like even less, like them ending up in some shitty fucking brick factory. Yeah.
My problem is that it's like a cop-out out of personal responsibility.
Sorry, how so?
Because if you say, well, I cannot consume ethically anyway under the system has to first change until I get ethical consumption. It's a total cop-out. You can do anything.
Just like with your rape example. Yeah, I follow that. I agree, of course. Yeah.
So that's my main point, and also like, I mean, I understand the notion. Obviously, I'm also leftist. There's not just individual, but there's also structural, but they interact. Like, those people that only focus on individualism are wrong, and those people that only focus on the structure are wrong. Like, we cannot do animal liberation purely on individual choice. Like, we have to change the system. Like, we have to do political change. But we also cannot do it on the other. Like, we cannot wait until the political system change to do the right thing.
This is great. I really like this conversation. This is good. I totally agree. You need the dual approach. You have to change the system and the individual. But there was one thing you said there that I wasn't totally sure about. I don't agree that all individuals are like bad or something because of the system. Like, I mean, I think, yeah.
No, I didn't say that all individuals
Oh,
are bad.
okay.
That was not.
Oh, then I missed something. But okay, I do agree you need the dual approach. Like with veganism, for example, I think that we have an individual responsibility to not support the mass murder of animals. Um, Yeah, I remember. So I think we have that individual responsibility, but I also think that clearly we want to do something top down. We want to make it illegal, right? And vegans, oh, I mean, I could go on about this. Vegans who are against making meat illegal, it's hilarious. They're like, well, I don't want to impose on other people, or like, oh, it's too radical a position. It's like, well, sorry, what's your view on murder? Right? Is your view on murder that you don't want to impose on other people? It's too radical a position. We should just let people murder. Or the funniest one, people will find meat anyway. There will be a black market for meat. It's like people will murder anyway. You know, like what are you talking about? You don't think it's going to massively reduce it to make it illegal?
But now I'm going to come back there with capitalism and individualism. So
Okay.
what you often also hear is choice, right? Like even vegans say, oh, but it's other people's choice. It's my choice. And with the choice argument, we can say, okay, but it can't be your choice because it's somebody else's life. So that cannot be your choice. But this whole focus on it's my choice is like, I would argue, is part of this cognitive framework of capitalism. That if I can pay it, I can go and I can buy it, then it's okay. Like I afford it, I give the money. So it's my choice to spend my money on this or that. I would argue that actually this whole logic that like derives social relations and so on from the process of consumption is part of the capitalist system and is part of capitalist thinking, which like the moral value of a product, right, is totally out of it. Like we don't think about if a child made it. We don't think if there's animals inside. And I would say this is a huge part of capitalism, of the fact that we pay with something with money. And we don't really pay for it, right? It's so distant, like cognitively distant from us. Like we are alienated from the product, from what it is.
Yeah.
So there I would say like a lot of this is also coming from this very capitalistic, individualistic perspective that it's my choice to do this. And also lots of leftists are like, because we are born in our world, we are born in like a high state of capitalism, a lot of leftists even have this argument and say, but it's choice. We need to leave people choices. But no, how can we leave choices for something immoral? Like, how can that be a choice?
Right.
Right?
I mean, clearly, choice shouldn't be like. I mean, your personal ability to choose can't be like the highest value, or else, like, well, I mean, what are we talking about? You just get to choose to like murder people or cause a ton of suffering, and I will give like a nod of agreement to part of the anti-capitalist argument there, because I do think that there's got to be an incentive to create that cognitive distance, or however you refer to it, between, or that create that kind of level of alienation between what you're seeing and buying and what actually happens for it, right? Because to the extent that you're not alienated in that way and you're made directly aware of the consequence of your purchase, like, you know, when pictures of cancerous lungs are put on cigarettes, or if you put like a, you know, some like animal being stabbed in the throat on like a steak or anything like this, to the extent that the alienation is minimized, the cognitive distance is minimized, however you refer to it, people are going to be less likely to buy it. So presumably there's actually an incentive to create the cognitive distance. Right? Doesn't that make sense?
Like,
Is there something I'm wrong there?
We have like this. I agree. Like this is part. Like we via money we buy stuff, and hence we are like not really there's no social relation between us and something. It's just a product, right? It's just a commodity. And this is a problem with its animals or nature even more. Like if it's, you know, if you commodify animals or nature and we put a price tag, there's like not that only that, once you put a price tag, people value something less. Like as we earlier said, when you said let's put a price, maybe we can put a price on human life, and I said I don't want to put a price on human life. Like I would never do it. Sure, I can make comparisons, utilitarian comparisons, but I would never put a monetary price because it's a weird logic. Like it's some artificial. There's no rationale to money. The only rationale is somebody is willing to pay something and has the ability to pay it. That's it.
See, we do disagree there, because as much as like I think the price would be exorbitantly high, it seems like if you say that there is no monetary value on life, then you end up with a reductio. Like, say that a life were worth so much money that you could fund all cancer research for the rest of time, all AIDS research for the rest of time, alleviate poverty in the third world, move all of the rest of the world into developed economy, like, etc., etc. I mean, there's got to be some value that eventually it's like, yep, we can kill a person. Like, that's a life is just not worth that much.
We don't have a disagreement on that. There's like, okay, theoretically,
yeah.
In theory, with a thought experiment, I agree.
Yeah.
In practice, the consequences of putting money, like putting a price tag on life.
Yep. Right? Totally agree.
Has consequences I'm not okay with.
Yep, absolutely. Now we agree about that.
I don't think we are in disagreement.
No, yeah, we both agree practically can't do it. That's ridiculous. But in theory, there has to be a price, or else you get a reductio. That's just insane. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So with the cognitive argument,
and there's probably.
Sorry, go ahead. It's for the record, when I'm cutting you off, it's because there's a delay. So sometimes I start talking and then I hear you start after. So that's why. But yeah, continue.
Okay, so this is part thinking of things and money is a problem, because it doesn't give us the true value of stuff, right? So this is a problem. And it also derives us of social interactions, and it means that we don't see the consequences of our actions. So that is the point. Then there's the thing about, like, for example, if you think of now the moral point, if you think of offsetting, have you heard of offsetting? Probably.
Oh, wait, but sorry, I one sec, before we get into the moral argument, the cognitive argument, sorry, are they part of the same argument, or are they separate? Cognitive argument, moral argument?
They overlap. I made them kind of two, but I don't think it makes sense to neatly differentiate them.
Because the cost externalization argument, that one I have pretty clear now. I don't fully have the structure of the cognitive argument cleared up. So
okay,
is it roughly something like, under capitalism, there's an incentive to create like a cognitive distance between yourself and what you're paying for, and that like leads to suffering, and therefore, that's bad? Like, is that like the kind of idea? If not, if I'm missing it, then try to clear it up for me, because it's probably not quite right.
I think it has like two dimensions. So it has that dimension that there's an incentive to like have the distance between us and the product, but also that by the habitus, that we do it all the time, this distance is created and means that something becomes less valuable once you put a price tag on it.
Okay, I don't know if I understand that part. How does putting a price tag on something make it less valuable? What do you mean exactly with that?
It's normally like it makes it less, well, that's like an experience, right? It's cognition. It makes it less, like we feel it's less valuable. Obviously now it's hard to compare because one is a feeling towards somebody and the other thing is a price tag. But typically there's psychological studies to that. Typically when you put a price tag on something, it's valued like we perceive of it in a different value than before.
Okay, so the idea is like capitalism puts prices on things. Putting prices on things causes us to emotionally value them less, and like that lower emotional value leads us to be more willing to create suffering. by like
Yeah.
buying. Okay, I guess that we don't have to write that one out formally, but I'm kind of skeptical of that first bit about putting a price tag on something makes us value it less. Like, could you give sort of an example of that happening, maybe?
I think there was a study about trees, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't really recall it. I would have to look it up again.
Okay.
But
Well,
maybe like I think you can a little bit also like the difference. I don't know. There's like personal relationship. If you don't have something with a price tag, there's also the personal relationship. But I can't give you an example yet. I'm too much stuck on the next example I want to give you. But maybe
okay.
that can clear it up.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, let's move on to the next one, but just let it be stated for the record that the thing that I'm a little tripped up with the cognitive argument is that putting a price tag on something actually causes us to devalue it. I agree that once we devalue things, like, you know, the suffering of the person on the other end or something, we'll be more ready to create that suffering. So like the rest of the argument, I think I'll agree with. It's just that bit I'd need kind of sort of like empirical proof for. But yeah, you don't have to do it right now if you don't have it handy. We can go to the moral argument.
But yeah, we still also agree that this distance by money does help us to like have the cognitive dissonance to not really think about the product.
Yeah, we agree that the profit motive incentivizes producers to create the cognitive distance. That I definitely agree with. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's a thing called offsetting. Yeah.
Okay.
So you
I
pollute
don't know what that is.
internalizing the price, huh?
I don't actually know what offsetting is, so you'll have to explain that to me.
So like you pollute and then you pay the price. Like you take an airplane and then you pay some company to plant trees.
Oh, so it is the idea that you offset the damage you create by doing some good elsewhere? Some people make funny arguments like this, like, you know, it's okay to, you know, support the animal mass murder if you give enough to charity, right? You're offsetting the damage. I hate arguments like that, for the record. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
So this is possible in capitalism, right? And it would be similar with if you internalize the price. It would be also you do some damage, but then on another space maybe we do the damage. It's already done like that, and it's basically amounts to even more than offsetting. I can't beat my own child, and then I save 5 children from being beaten.
Mm-hmm.
And we both agree it's still immoral, right? To like beat my own child. If then I saved 5 children from being beaten.
Here's my thing. Here's my thing. So I agree. I don't like it. I'm not a utilitarian in that kind of strict sense. For me, it's like I don't think that it's right to. Well, I guess I shouldn't necessarily saddle utilitarianism with that. So just forget that comment for a second. But yeah, I think that the offset would have to be pretty large for me to be okay with it. Like, there is some amount of good I could do on the other end where I'd finally say, like, yeah, okay, like, it's fine to, like, beat your kid if you really get to do that much good. But it would have to be, like, quite a lot. Because imagine if you said that there's no amount, right? Like, again, you get
we have the same thing with putting a price tag on people.
Exactly.
Like it's a similar thing, and there
yeah, it's practically totally untenable. Like, you can't go and rape someone and be like, oh, what, I gave like $10,000 to like women's shelters. It's like, wait, like, sorry, like, you still should not be raping. Like, that, I agree practically, of course, but there's, yeah, just theoretically there's got to be some threshold where you're like, okay, fine, you can do it.
Okay. So we are kind of like at this point where we are like say, okay, it's at least the system does not promote responsibility. We are not saying it promotes irresponsibility, but for sure the system how we set it up doesn't promote responsibility.
Yeah, there's nothing about the profit motive that is going to entail companies or individuals be responsible. Yeah, we agree about that. I still have my concern about if you can regulate responsibility in, which I'm sure you firmly disagree with. But yes, I agree with you though.
Yeah, and then for the monetizing something, there's also the argument. A common example, nobody cleans their rental car.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if you have a rental car, but and now going to social relations, which would be necessary to like protect the common good, if you if you have your neighbor's car and you go out with it, you would clean it.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you have a social relation, right?
Yeah. This connects to one interesting
this is like a
thing.
example.
Have you ever seen those like studies where they set up in a neighborhood? I forget what it is. If they put some kind of public bulletin of like, I don't know if it's carbon reduction or if it's like donation to charity, but it's some kind of good thing. And when they put a public bulletin where the people in the neighborhood are measured, everyone starts like doing more for the common good that's publicly displayed. Yeah, I think there's actually data that shows. Sorry, say again.
We are also conformists. There's a whole thing about the towels in a hotel. Like if you say let's do it for saving the environment, people don't do it. But if you say 85% of our customers do it, then people do it.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. We are like, this is a whole problem of like also of paying for stuff. We are so used to paying for stuff, and like we stop thinking about it, and we're like just like, I'm not gonna say cheap because obviously we all like cheap, but we're just like, you know, going our way, functioning within the system.
Yeah.
And then there's another point to it. So once you get used to that, you like pay with stuff and so on, and that is, you feel like entitled. You feel entitled to stuff that you can pay for, right? We have like we have this, even still we have the idea that people can have a private jet if they have the money. Like nobody makes a moral argument about that a private jet actually is a lot of like environmental pollution or so on. Normally what we say is, oh, if they can afford it, it's okay. We don't think about other consequences. We only think about monetary terms.
I don't know if that's true. I think a lot of people do care about the consequences of, you know, allowing people to own private things that are like really bad. Like, do people always just think if you can afford it, it's okay? It seems like there's tons of examples where it's like, if you can afford to like pay a hitman, like that's not okay, or if you can afford to.
Let's say society, okay, but hitman, those are things that are already forbidden forever. I'm not sure. You would have to have something newly introduced. I don't know how that would like.
Like, if you can afford it and it's legal.
Yeah, at the moment, if it's legality,
I guess I'm not. I guess I'm not sold on that. I agree that a lot of people are gonna go, hey, he can afford it. It's legal. You know, what's the problem? You got a problem? Go make it illegal. Like I agree, a lot of people will say stuff like that, but I do think that there's a substantial amount of people who have sentiments like you or like me who are gonna say like, no, it doesn't matter if it's legal and you can afford it. There's some things that are bad that we need to not do.
Okay, but we are not that loud, or not loud enough. Like I
Okay.
agree. Like I'm I'm talking about the societal substantial number of people. Like,
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I believe we're insignificant. Yeah, like as I said, we're fucked, we're screwed. We have to fight, and it's our duty to do stuff. But
yeah, I don't think moral arguments are going to stop people from buying private jets anytime soon. I think that you have to do something about it to make that not. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm like in politics, because I want to forbid
yeah.
stuff.
Right.
It
sounds very German. Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually like people hate it, and they're always like, every party is like, no, we don't want to forbid anything. We are not the party of forbidding stuff. And always like, I'm always like, well,
yeah.
I do want to forbid.
Yeah, you're like, fuck that. We're forbidding. Yeah.
Look at this consequences. Bam, bam, bam. We need to forbid me.
Yeah, forbid the shit out of this. Absolutely.
Yeah. Why? Like, why not? You're already not gonna be. And then they're like, oh, freedom. You know, freedom is also like this weird concept.
Yeah, freedom to not wear a mask, freedom to pollute the environment, freedom to murder. Oh wait, no, that one's not okay. Oh wait, where's the barrier on freedom? It's a
Yeah.
funny thing to have as your highest value. You must love libertarians, eh?
Yeah. They're so far like my biggest. Um, I actually, I looked at my chapter for capitalism again in my PhD today, and there was a passage about trashing libertarians. Like
Yeah,
they are the worst. They
I
are the
mean,
worst.
I like there's some aspects of libertarianism that like I am okay with. Like yes, I agree that we want people to be as free as possible, but it's the idea of like really overvaluing freedom that just gets insane because freedom is orthogonal to things like well-being, right? It's like
That,
I mean, how much well-being are you willing to trade off for freedom? I don't know if you've ever seen Oh, sorry, you want to say something?
yeah, there's another dimension to it. First, freedom is never an absolute, and there's different kinds of freedom, right? There's political freedom, there's economic freedom, there's
Sure.
social freedom. All those have trade-offs, and they never openly admit that you cannot have absolute freedom in everything, but one kind of freedom will restrict the other kind of freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
It's actually Isaiah Berlin, two concepts of liberty.
Hmm.
So there's negative liberty, which would be freedom from interference, which the libertarians love, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't want to pay taxes, we don't want government interference. But then on the left side, there's positive freedom, which would be education, healthcare,
Mhm.
because this also enables you, right? It gives you another kind of freedom. If you get healthcare, you
Mhm.
also have freedom. And they like
Yep.
totally screw on that.
There's actually, I think, a reductio on the position that we shouldn't have any positive liberty or positive obligations. Like, say that and once you establish the reductio, then it's just a matter of being like, okay, well, let's just go down and down and down and see where you drop off on this idea. So, say that there's a galaxy-wide, just brutal enslavement and torture of people happening, and you are able to stop this by blinking. Do you have an obligation to blink? Right? If you say that there are no positive obligations, apparently not. And people will take this hilarious position. I've had libertarians say to me, well, it would be virtuous to blink, but there's no obligation to blink. It's like, sorry, but are you a fucking lunatic? Right? Of course there's an obligation to blink if it's going to end, galaxies of suffering. So, yeah, I
But
think
do
there's a
they even
reductio on
have
that
a
view.
sense? Do they even believe in the word obligation? No, right?
I think they do. I think they believe they have obligations in the negative sense. Like they have an obligation not to murder someone because that infringes on their their negative liberty or something like that. So I think they do believe in obligation, but it's the denial of like positive obligation that just gets really hilarious. There's one. Do you know Sam Cedar on YouTube? He's like a leftist
I've seen
program.
something, but I don't remember. Yeah.
I mean, I don't really watch. It's the Majority Report. I've called in one. This is another leftist who I talk to, and I mean, if you want to see another cringy vegan conversation where a leftist like totally rejects, veganism in the most hilarious ways ever, you can go watch that conversation. But I do have to say, the debates where libertarians call in to the Majority Report are some of the funniest debates on the internet. They call in with things like wanting to like abolish the EPA, and Cedar will make these points like, we established the EPA originally because there was so much pollution that this lake actually caught on fire. And they end up sitting there arguing against having the thing. It's just complete insanity. Or they get super triggered over things like driver's licenses. Like, it'll be like, what, you want your like 8-year-old kid to be able to like drive the car around if they see fit? It's just crazy.
It's yeah, and like in fact, like those libertarian politicians, if it goes to the protection of capitalism, they sometimes become strong statey anyway.
Sorry, you cut out a bit. If what happens, they
Yeah.
become statey?
Anyhow, like I don't know. I hope our conversation today helps you if you in the future have to argue leftist. I hope it's fruitful in that sense also.
Oh yeah, you've certainly given me the best.
Yeah.
This is the strongest anti-capitalist case that I've heard so far. It's just with the first argument, I'm hung up on P2. I just need the empirical proof. With the second one, I just need to understand why putting a price on something actually like causes us to value it less, and then additionally that it's sufficiently less that it's going to result in some kind of problem. I need to understand what the alternative system is you're proposing, and then with the moral argument, I'm just not quite totally clear what the moral argument is yet. Did we want to clear that up before finishing, or are you feeling like wrapping up now?
I have 4 points actually.
Sorry,
And
you
as
cut
I
it. You
said,
cut out
like,
again.
my
You
aim
have.
is not.
Sorry, you cut out. My bad. Can you say that again?
I have a couple more points actually.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, I have even more points.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my whole point was like drag you to the left side. I didn't say I'm gonna make like this perfectly, like especially in cognition. In cognition, it's so hard to prove unless we are in the future actually like measuring brain waves and can really tell.
Sure.
The cognitive argument is always going to be the weaker one than the materialist argument, right?
Seems like it. Yeah. Yeah. Because the cognitive one, you kind of have to rely on someone sharing your same intuition about how people tend to think, and I'm not sure I share it, so it creates a bit of a problem there, because then it's hard to prove. But yeah, the material one is pretty straightforward. Like, if there's data for P2 that's solid, then I'll be like, okay, yeah, I think it is the case, we need another system, and then it's just a matter of, like, can you propose a system that'll actually do a better job with respect to these problems. So I haven't been moved to the.
Theory,
so I should just say I haven't been moved all the way to the anti-capitalist position, but I have in the sense that I've been moved is that I see the logic and I have a clear idea of what you would have to do to like finish that like push to make me go there. So yeah. we can talk again sometime too. I found this a good conversation, so you can always ping me if you want to talk more.
As I said, like I'm trying to convince you, Poli, and not today. But yeah. So
all right.
One more point, if you want.
Did you say one more point or 4 more points? It cut out.
I had a couple.
Sure. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's hear them. Let's go for it.
So, I'm gonna like hassle a little bit through them. And just to give you a feeling, I'm not saying like I like to exaggerate sometimes also like for populist purposes. So I'm not saying you need to be logically 100% convinced. I just want to like give you some of these cognitive things to just have like a background feeling.
Yeah. So I won't really push too hard on these. I'll just kind of let you go through them so you can just get them on the table. So yeah, just go ahead.
Like, I mean, I also see, like, I'm a social scientist, but I really like natural science. So I see the appeal of having, like, strong points you can easily falsify or verify. But, like, with a lot of things between human interrelations and, like, psychology, cognition, and so on, I don't think there's, like, I think those are, like, weak science, whatever, however you want to call it, no? Okay. So another point is capitalism promotes inequality, and it's shown, there's studies that show that the more unequal a society, the larger the footprint, which is probably comes from comparison. If your neighbor has a big car, you also want a bigger car. So it's called relative deprivation. You don't have deprivation, you're not poor, but in relation to what the neighbor has, you also want to have. So probably that's why in societies that are more unequal, people consume more, and capitalism like does create inequalities, especially since capital is inherited, right? There's like capital is inherited, so hence those things get like even bigger. Capitalism is property centric, so it's very much about materialist culture, and for the environment, we would need to like move away from materialist consumerist to like a different form of society, right? And what another point is, property is such a holy grail that we cannot imagine taking it away from somebody. So just an example, in Germany, there's a coal company and they have huge coal fields, and they're still drilling coal. And now the government gives them 4 billion euro, so they stop it. But you could argue, how does nature belong to them in the first place? Why do we have to compensate them with billions of euro? How can somebody like own nature? So in capitalism, we establish this property, like the property is such a high value, somebody needs to compensate you. When in real, the earth belongs to all of us, right? Like how could we have started to like sell parts of the earth as property? And now going to a sustainable system, we would have to try to like buy back those rights, buy back those lands that maybe have a gold mine that you shouldn't dig because then the water gets polluted. So there's a big problem that capitalism, and like in particular in like its American form, because it's built on the idea that humanness, there's also property, which you might, I don't know, nobody said that it names a trait yet, right? John Locke defined humans as like humanness as like pursuit of happiness, something else I don't remember, and having property. But nobody named that as like something new as a human trait that differentiates us from animals.
The ability to own property? I haven't heard that yet. I've heard human put forward as the trait, but that just has hilarious reductios.
It doesn't count. That doesn't count. But John Locke kind of said this humanness defined it by like, you know, pursuit of happiness and like property owning, which you could say some animals also have property. Like mine have some toys. Yeah. Actually they own the whole house.
There you go.
They have more property than I have.
Cat rights, yeah.
Yeah, at least if you ask them. So this property-centric, it's a property-centric, there's a problem also for like achieving sustainability, because states don't have the money to buy back all this nature from companies, right? So this is like, we could argue that this is like, if we overcome the system, we're just going to take it back by force to the state and make it the common good again. But within capitalism, it's not possible. It's too expensive. No government can afford, the community, the people cannot afford to buy it back normally. Okay, so that's the problem.
Okay.
Then like, then a cognitive problem is that capitalism is ego-focused. I already had that, like individualist, while ecology is about interrelations. And there, with like, right, with capitalism, you can have like remote interactions that are not together, but the environment is like an interactive, overlapping system. And there ethically, I think it's like, for me, like when I approach the world, I'm actually going by the harm principle, which you can like say, okay, it's mostly negative utility, but as like in my daily life, I like to apply harm principle. And if you really look at all the interconnections, you see that almost any action I do in my life, I'm probably going to cause harm somehow, right?
Yeah, I mean, on some level. Not net harm, though.
Yeah, we will see in P2. In P2, will show that almost everything harm. And yeah, so in capitalism, it's not about interrelations. It doesn't focus on the harm. Like, this is totally out. And then there's like, we already talked about interest rates, which some economists should like explain to you, because I like really don't feel competent to explain why there's a discourse of that capitalist companies always have to grow and like reinvest. There's like a whole like bookshelves full of books why they have this, why capitalism puts them under such pressure. So then there's like things, in order to make profit, it makes sense to make your products disposable, like easily, like, you know, like an iPod. You remember iPod? There was planned.
I've heard this point. This is planned. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard this.
After 2 years, it breaks because you want to make more money. Which you could say maybe through internalization, we could get rid of it. I'm not doubting that this is not possible. As you said, restrained capitalism that internalize the price. You could, for example, say that any company that sells a television has to repair it for the next 15 years. You could introduce a right, the law that companies have to repair instead of replace. So this is possible. I'm not saying that there is no, for certain small little problems, there's no solution to it. Then there's like what those people that say capitalism can be green and there can be sustainable capitalism, they say that there can be a decoupling between GDP and CO2 emissions. So at the moment, it is like if you look at a curve from GDP in any country and you look at CO2e emissions. By the way, I'm using CO2e and CO2 interchangeably, but it should be CO2e, which is not just carbon, but nitrogen and so on. So they calculate it into CO2 because people are using CO2. So the correct term to do the ecological footprint would be CO2e.
Yeah, the E just means equivalent, right?
Yeah, exactly. That everything, all the others are calculated into carbon. Like methane is 24% as potent as carbon, so it will be somehow calculated as I don't know. As I said, I'm not a chemist.
I get the idea, though.
Main area of expertise. So those curves go like this, right? GDP and carbon emissions. They're like pretty much. If there's an economic clash, down goes the carbon emissions also. So the argument is that there can be decoupling, meaning GDP can still grow, but carbon emissions shrink. That has been empirically not proven that this is possible. Like there's lots of ideas why it's not possible, but and there's like this, they're called ecological modernization theories and very on vogue. Some of them like do the Green New Deal stuff and so on. But yeah, in theory, there can be a decoupling. In practice, it's not happening.
Yeah. So do you actually take the view that it's been shown that it's not possible, or you're just saying you're agnostic and it's not been demonstrated that this decoupling could happen?
I would say it's a little bit like in theory it's possible, but in practice it's like it's not an argument. I don't think it's happening. It can happen. Like I would not, like if I go by percentage, I would say 95%. I'm sure it cannot happen in real life.
Okay.
But I'm not certain. To be honest, I'm not certain. It can never happen. But what we, for example, saw during Corona, for 1 month, whole Earth was not consuming anything that they didn't need, or maybe through Amazon, but we were like consuming way less shit.
Yeah.
Right? And the whole global economy like collapsed. Our whole global economy is dependent on us consuming bullshit. Like this is Corona proves this. Like if we stop consuming bullshit and only consume our necessities, the global economy is going to collapse. Which is also kind of indirectly proves the point that sustainability is not possible under capitalism. Because sustainability would mean that we're only going to consume those things that are necessary to us, which you will see with P2.
You're just waving that book at me, eh?
I am. I can wave a cat at you. They're actually being really cute here.
Aww. 2 of them, eh?
Yeah, 2 boys. They were cute.
Oh, that's nice. That's good.
No one was talking. Okay, so then we're almost at the end.
Yeah, that's fine. Just take your time. Yeah. We can talk about some of these in detail at some other time, maybe. But yeah, just feel free to go through them.
Okay, and at the moment, in capitalism, power is so aggregated into these large corporations that actually those have more power than government. We agree on that?
More power is something we have to quantify and talk about how, but I agree they have inordinate amounts of power. I mean, they have too
At
much
least,
power. That if that's
okay,
sufficient.
let's say lots of companies have more power than the everything except G20. Like for sure, they have more power than Burkina Faso.
I
Like
mean,
almost any large
it
corporation will
depends.
have more power.
I'd need to know how we're quantifying power to really accept that. So that would be an empirical thing we'd have to talk through.
Okay,
But I grant that
let's
they
say
have too much power, though, if that's
okay.
sufficient for your argument to work.
Okay, but we agree that those large corporations get to make decisions about the environment and the
Yes.
common good that
Yep.
should be in the government's hands.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so that's like one of the points. Then
Hmm.
like at the end there is like which we at the end there's a point capitalism has no incentive for a sharing economy.
I don't
It
know what a
would be
sharing
more
economy is.
like instead of everybody having something, we would like share. We would like you, for example, not every household needs a washing machine. It's enough if in one apartment complex there's a couple washing machines,
Hmm.
but not everybody needs a washing machine or a drill. Not
Oh,
everybody
okay.
needs a drill,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But capitalism has no incentive that we are sharing because when we're sharing, we're not consuming.
I
So
mean,
it
there
would be
might
more.
there might sometimes kind of be an incentive. Like, for example, if you're trying to create a you want to create like an apartment complex, you're going to be incentivized actually to build some like shared laundry room with like 5 machines instead of make like get like 20 machines and give each unit their own. So there's to some degree an incentive to share, but I also understand on the end of the washing machine producer, they don't have that incentive. They want to try to get you to buy as many washing machines as possible. So I think there's some level of incentive there, but I agree there's also a big incentive to just produce the shit out of whatever it is, like there is with any product. So yeah.
Okay. So I think I like went to almost all my points, if I see this correctly. One of them would also be like, we are so used to all the stuff that if we give up something, we think it's a sacrifice because we
Mm,
are so fucking entitled. Which you could say it's not just capitalism, it's our consumerist society that makes us like this entitled shitheads that think
mm,
we have a choice to eat animals and stuff like that. But I would kind of think it's also part of capitalism that gives us this entitlement.
mm.
Um, yeah, but yeah, you could argue about that.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I basically think I made like lots of points. Obviously, I probably forgot lots of other points I could make. As I said, I like for years I've been born left. So um, yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I guess if we're wrapping up, yeah, I really like this conversation. It's nice to have someone who's like got spent a lot of time thinking about it, has built some arguments and stuff, and to go through those things. There's still areas I'm a bit hung up on. Obviously, we didn't really talk through some of those later arguments in detail. There's bits I agree with, bits I disagree with. I think that first argument that we formalized, that was looking pretty strong. So yeah, I know I've already said this, but yeah, I'd just be interested in that empirical proof for P2, because that would get me to we need another system that's not capitalist. And then it would just be a matter of establishing that there's some kind of plausible model for a system like that. And yeah, then with some of the other points, there's the cognitive thing. I'd be curious to know. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe you don't think that can be proven exactly, and you just kind of rely on people having a similar intuition about how prices, affect our valuing of things. That's fair. But if there is an empirical proof there, I'd be curious for it. And
I would if I have like some. I think there was, but
mhm.
I'm not one of like about trees.
So yeah, just
Yeah.
just spam me up with sources for that P2, and if at some point you want to have a future conversation where you actually put forward your model for an alternative system, or where we go further into this argument, yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with all that, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like, I really like to argue with people, and I also like, I mean, you didn't trash me. I was waiting for like you getting me on some point, and like me crying.
Well, no,
It
sometimes it's
didn't
not a
happen.
matter of like, I don't always have the, well, okay, I'm glad you're not crying. I mean, thank God, but I don't always have enough knowledge of a topic to actually falsify a point. And I just react honestly, right? Like if someone makes an argument and it's like, my honest reaction isn't like that's right or that's wrong. It's just I just don't fucking know and I'd need more to be convinced. Then I'll just say that. I just need more data or something like this. So no, I think the fact that it didn't turn into me trashing you is just the out of you being relatively reasonable and like modest enough about the claims you're making. So it's not much to trash. There's just a request for some further data on some of the points.
I do I do myself as sound political. So I pride myself in being relatively reasonable while being radical. So yeah.
Did you tab out of the Discord window? Your screen froze.
No.
Oh,
I
okay, you're
tapped
back. You're back.
into.
You're
Oh, I
back.
tapped out.
Yeah, sometimes if I think it might be
I made
tabbing
you
out, it
bigger.
makes it freeze. Okay, well I don't know why it did that, but you froze for a second. Yeah, okay. Well, I guess.
I full screen.
Okay, well apparently I can't be on full screen, but yeah. So I guess that's it for now. But you know, thanks a bunch for your time, and it was a great conversation. You want to talk more? Just let me know.
Well, I'm kind of like free a lot, so just yeah, we can talk in the future. Like I'm gonna give you the data about
The
P2,
data,
and
yes.
then we're gonna have a cute small conversation on how convinced you are.
All right. Well, so be it. Thanks again, eh?
So have a nice night. Bye bye.
Yeah, same to you.